What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Spencer, and today is not an anime Monday, but instead a movie Monday. Kevin and I, we don't want to just start releasing random content on the channel just quite yet because it's still primarily a Yu-Gi-Oh channel. So we want Monday to be our flex spot. So we thought instead of doing it an anime Monday, we would make it a movie Monday. And today we are going over the extravaganza, the culmination of everybody's hopes and dreams. That is the Zack Snyder cut. And I'm joined, of course, by Kevin, because this is our podcast.
Yo.
Kevin, it happened, bro. Zack Snyder has realized his dream. It has been kept alive, and it is here.
There were people who didn't live to see this day, and I feel bad for those people because I got to watch the Snyder cut and they didn't. Justice League was released, I believe, in 2018 or 2017.
Wow, so it has been some time since that movie came out, and it's long, that's for sure. I guess the first part of our discussion, before I get into any of the specifics, because this is broken down into parts. Like, this is not, it is a cohesive movie. It does have a story from start to beginning, but the original kind of rumor was that it was going to be released in parts only, and we get it like that. Are you happy it came out in this 4-hour just conglomerate, or should they have released it slowly?
Happy is a weird kind of descriptor to put on how I feel about this situation, because no one wants to watch a 4-hour movie. I don't think anyone wants to willingly watch a 4-hour long movie. That's just a ridiculous thing to ask of somebody. But otherwise, like, I think the way that we watched it was probably the correct way to watch it. I don't think if they did split it up into 6 parts and then its own epilogue. I think if I had to watch those parts one at a time, I would have enjoyed it a lot less.
Really? If it was,
yeah.
Well, what if they released it at all points, but just had it in parts, like it was a list of videos instead of? I know that doesn't make much of a difference, but it does kind of contextualize it a bit separately.
I don't know. I don't think that. Yeah, I don't think it makes much of a difference. It doesn't really affect my frame of mind, really, because the things that are really going to stand out are like the moments.
I do appreciate it, actually. Like, the parts were not random. Like, they did tell a story in parts there. So there was a method to his madness. It was also filmed, or I guess released, in 4:3 aspect ratio, which I don't think either of us know the reason for that. But I don't think the movie looked bad at all. Like, they did touch up a lot of the effects, and the movie just is better on the eyes.
I'm looking at a bunch of the press that Zack Snyder has done, in conjunction with the release of this film. He has not explained that at all. I'm looking for the explanation of why this is in 4:3 aspect ratio, because it's obviously very jarring at first. Like, if you didn't anticipate that, it's gonna be very difficult to get used to, especially in the earlier parts of the film. But I think once you kind of got like settled into the tone and everything like that, it fit. I think it fit, especially for how certain shots were done and how they were framed. I think the 4:3 aspect ratio really helped support what they were going for creatively. So, a lot of people are going to complain about it and say it's edgy and useless, but that's the choice he made, and I think I can live with that.
Yeah, and the movie just looks physically darker, which I guess better fits a theme, because you kind of see this conglomerate of bright red colors, and this is kind of, what you're getting from scene to scene. It doesn't challenge itself, which I guess is the bad part, but at least stylistically it follows some sort of theme throughout the entire film.
Yeah, definitely thematically and just, tonally, everything is far more cohesive in this version, which I think is like, it's obviously one of the biggest things that you could have expected coming into watching, something like this, something that has been, vaunted and coveted by millions of online fans. You could at the very least expect it to be better than the original, and I think they did a very good job accomplishing that as far as just filling in, the very clear empty spaces left in the theatrical release.
And I would say, naturally, being that it is a 4-hour movie, things are going to make a lot more sense contextually, but I also will give him credit and say that things are fleshed out and there are meanings to the conflict of this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably the biggest gripe that Zack Snyder had with the I don't know. He claims to have never seen the theatrical release. I honestly don't think that's true. There's no way he hasn't. But I can definitely see where, like, you know, his original vision was better. He had a better original vision for the film than what we ended up getting in the theatrical release. And, you know, that involved a lot of, you know, characterization for characters that we didn't get. Like, at the time, we weren't introduced to these people. We had no idea, you know, really the backstory of Aquaman or the Flash or Cyborg, and we didn't really learn much through their on-screen debuts in the theatrical release. So, being able to go back and kind of, you know, set the stage a little better for you know, all these different moving pieces that they had in the movie, I think was, you know, it really helped the story. It helped to make the story a lot more interesting as well, which is probably the biggest thing, is that the story in the Snyder cut versus how it came across in the original theatrical release are completely different, and the Snyder cut story is far more engaging and interesting.
One part about this that I really want to talk to you about, and this is something I had not thought about at all until you brought it up, is whether or not, like, what this movie actually is. We will never know how much of the movie was given to Joss Whedon to, like, be completed, but you seem to think that he basically remade the movie. Like, he altered his original script and everything when they reshot. Like, he didn't just take his original idea and just make it actually happen on screen. You think he's probably saw the movie and made revisions about what he thinks could have been better in retrospect?
Yeah, that's part of me being on some hater shit. Like, part of it was me being a hater and just being like, well, he probably just saw how bad the original cut was. But it's enough like the original version to where I can buy into the fact that this is his original kind of, like, idea for what he wanted. But then the stuff that was actually added on afterwards is very clear to notice. Like I don't know if we want to talk about it later, but there's definitely stuff that stuck out as like, oh, that's definitely something that they added in afterwards. Like, this is definitely not part of anyone's original vision.
And it's very interesting because in Batman vs Superman, it is the culmination of, like, 3 of the biggest stories in DC Universe kind of put into one. In this, it finally feels like a standalone movie where, like, important things happen, but even Darkseid, that has been teased throughout all of this, isn't really a huge part of the movie. He's kind of takes the Thanos role of being behind the scenes, and I think it's good for Zack Snyder to see something like, you do not have to stick to these massive stories that DC has created for years past. You can touch upon them, but make your own movie. Like, what can you do with it?
Yeah, and I think that leads into the, like, you know, let's like, we can talk about Steppenwolf. Like, I think,
yeah, sure,
Steppenwolf has probably undergone, you know, among the characters that overwent like a huge kind of, you know, narrative makeover, Steppenwolf probably got the best buff, I think, of any character, because, you know, he literally had no reason to be doing anything that he was doing in the original theatrical release, and they gave him, like I said, like the best part about the Snyder cut in kind of reference to its counterpart is that it gives, the characterization is much better. Like, everyone has kind of like their own little mini arc that they have to deal with, or their own kind of series of events that they have to grapple with as the you know, as the film goes on. And Steppenwolf is really good. He went from this dude just being, he was just like originally just like really horny for the mother boxes. Like, that was basically his whole character, right? And now it's like actually something where he was disgraced in some way and has to try and make it up to Darkseid, which is ultimately a lot more compelling. So I found myself far more invested in Steppenwolf's journey because it felt like there were actual reasons for doing it.
Yeah, in the original, he kind of plays the Darkseid role of a world conqueror, and I mean, that's supposed to be his spot, you know? And he ultimately is a little baby bitch to Darkseid, which I think is great. He's still powerful, but it's nice to know, and we'll give spoilers here. I don't think there's any reason not to at this point.
You guys have seen this movie. Like, if you've seen Justice League, guys, it is very much the same film. There's very few like kind of overall changes.
it's just nice to know that he is collecting these boxes to help Darkseid, and also that these boxes aren't just these ominous like random things that destroy, like they are planted seeds for Darkseid to control everybody. So there's a lot more weight what these objects actually do, and it just seems things happen and there's some sort of progression that we're working towards, versus him just kind of yuling on everybody. When Superman kicks his ass at the end of the movie, that's really nice to see, because Darkseid is ultimately the only person who can challenge him. And in the original theatrical release, like they all have to fight and band together to make it to do anything. But here,
Superman is just
him,
beating
bro.
his ass for sport, man. It was a game for him. It's very intriguing. I liked it, you know. I enjoyed myself while I watched it. It definitely felt like it was 4 hours long though. Like I needed to take an actual break while we watched it. Like I stopped it and I took like a 20-30 minute break, you know? So it's like, but I think I can respect this. I can respect its existence. I can respect, I think, whatever comes as a result. You know that I was very, very skeptical on the mere concept of this film existing, right? But I honestly think that, you know, now that I've been able to watch it and all of that stuff, and I've been able to compare it to, you know, its theatrical counterpart and all of that stuff, I think I can appreciate the fact that Zack Snyder had a very clear-cut vision for this film. And he was able to get the opportunity to execute that vision almost to like the most, you know, precise detail. And that's very rare. That's not something we really get to see in the movie making industry these days. And so I think we should kind of, you know, revel and appreciate stuff like that happening. So this is actually some dude's like full creative vision realized. And it is, you know, we got to see. This is a very rare situation. We got to see something we normally would never get to see. We usually, if we get a kind of over corporatized, kind of mangled mess of a film, we never really get to see the artist's original vision for that film. And we actually got to this time. And I think that is a pretty important and pretty cool thing that we can appreciate above everything else when it comes to the Snyder Cut.
And I think that's what DC should be focusing on more than anything, because Marvel is criticized all the time for not giving creative control to their directors and kind of having these ideas. And for the beginning of this little adventure, DC was trying to emulate Marvel, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Like just a darker kind of, but we're all leading up to this big kind of battle with the Justice League. And when you do stuff like this, which is it a perfect representation of DC? No, of course. Like he kind of did some weird stuff with Batman. We know it was like killing people, but at least it's the journey. Like this was basically a long thing. Like we have Infinity War and Endgame in terms of that kind of connection. Like he wanted to continue the story of Batman versus Superman, which he had set up, and what happened in the immediate aftermath of that. Like that's kind of the frame of reference in here, versus the theatrical release where it's kind of like time has passed and here's the new conflict. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so this is kind of created like this. It's carved out its own kind of separate narrative independence from that entire corporate backed initiative to match the Avengers with DC's characters. You know what I mean? So when we can look at it now is like you have Man of Steel, you had Batman vs Superman, and then you had the Snyder Cut of Justice League. It's like that's his trilogy. That was his story that he wanted to tell, I guess. And I think when you can look at it like that, it's much more cohesive. It makes a lot more sense. And when you're not like beholden to, you know, this goes into a greater conversation about like gatekeeping and stuff like that, and how these characters that you know, Zack Snyder didn't create these characters, and you know most of the filmmakers who work on Marvel films didn't create those characters either, and it lends itself to a greater conversation about like how should we treat these characters when they've kind of like, you know, they're custodians of the characters, you know what I mean? Like they're placed in the care of these directors, and it's the director's job to kind of not betray those characters. That's kind of always how we've looked at it, but we've never kind of had it open up to someone's like their own personal interpretation of a character. And you know, if anything, that's what Zack Snyder brings to the table, is his own personal interpretation of characters like Superman and Batman and the Justice League. And like it or not, this is how he views them, and he was able to get it across in a really honest and authentic way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one thing I guess is worth noting before we go into some more details about the movie is it is very violent. They do not.
It's this is an R-rated movie, and he milked every last little particle of that R rating, man. This is not a superhero movie you should watch with your kids, folks. Like,
I think the movie's better off for that, being that the majority of the people who wanted this movie were the edgelords, and it's not kids who wanted a remake of the Justice League. I don't think
the people
cared.
who wanted this are people who are familiar with Zack Snyder's work and respect his work. Zack Snyder, he relies on a lot of certain motifs in his films. They're very dark, gritty, like, edgy, all of that kind of stuff. And so it was kind of something you had to accept, at the door when it comes to Zack Snyder. And a lot of people couldn't get over that hump, as me especially when they watched Batman vs Superman. And I think that if I had gone into this without kind of making peace with the idea that, like, Batman might just kill someone in this movie, if I didn't accept that, there was zero possibility that I would have enjoyed it in any capacity. So if that is something that you are holding on to before watching this, I would just advise you to let that shit go. You're just gonna have to let it go and interpret and interpret the story for how it is presented to you.
His Ben Affleck Batman is a consistent character.
Yeah, for sure.
He's not all over the place. That Bruce Wayne that we see from the very first time in Batman vs Superman very much feels like the same character in this Justice League, which I think is also a very good thing. So this movie, we can talk about. I will say, for example, he also took out a lot of the cringe. I think that's also.
Yeah, I was about to talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I personally think, so a lot of what we didn't like about the theatrical cut of Justice League is, it does feel like the homogenized kind of, there's a very kind of set style we have that we come to expect with like Marvel content. You know what I mean? It's hard to kind of nail down the exact descriptor of how, like, but they do all feel kind of structurally similar in a way, like whether it's the way they're shot, the way they're written, the way they like implement music and stuff like that, and obviously like and really heavily in the way they're written, because a lot of the humor is similar throughout the Marvel filmography. When Joss Whedon took over production of the film from Zack Snyder when he initially left, there was a lot of that injected, and it made the theatrical cut of Justice League feel a lot more homogenized, like a lot of those Marvel films. And I think obviously a lot of what we see in the Snyder cut is corrective of that, but I also think that at the same time it's able to carve out its own personality through humor in its own right. Like there's humor in this movie, but it is decidedly different and decidedly kind of more in line with the tone of the movie.
And I think we can also just appreciate Zack Snyder for the art of filmmaking. Because I agree with you. Like, people are talking about Black Panther maybe winning an award, which was never going to happen, just because it felt like every other movie they had released. And it's safe, and it's not bad. It's not a horrible formula, but it does get tiring after a while. Like I told you, I'm not watching the rest of Vision. I'm not watching the Hawkeye show or whatever it's called.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I just have to get away from it for a while. So it was cool to see there are establishing shots and camera doesn't flip every 5 seconds in this movie. So outside of what happens actually in those scenes, it's cool to see a movie feel like a movie.
Yeah, like and I still enjoy those Marvel films, but there are aspects of filmmaking that I'm more preferential to. And so they have those, when you have Marvel, you have a lot of those like big sweeping shots or those big landscape shots, and then pretty much for most of the action you're going to get like shaky cam footage, right? Which I personally do not really like that much, and it's really hard for me to follow. With the Snyder cut, you have a lot of long shots, you have a lot of long takes, you have a lot of kind of, kinetic cinematography. I think it conveys a certain kind of energy. There's, in the way the camera moves, there's a lot of sweeping panning shots, just stuff that really kind of there's a bold visual motif throughout the entire film, and I can really appreciate stuff like that, especially just the fact that there aren't as many cuts. Shots are just longer. I've always appreciated stuff like that. Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director, and he always, one of his core philosophies was that he thought too many camera cuts were pretentious, and I think that's a philosophy that I think is best applied. It's applied really well in this Snyder.
The only thing I didn't like about this, the way he edited the movie, I suppose, is there's a few too many slow shots, slow motion. The movie is 4 hours long because of how many slow motion.
So yeah, that's another Snyder thing, man. You go back, you watch the Watchmen movie, you go back, you watch 300. This dude loves his slow-mo, dude. And yeah, the movie could probably be well under 4 hours. You might have even been able to get it under 3 hours if there just weren't so many slow-mo shots, man.
Some of them are good and impactful in the moment, and I think when he does kind of the fast-paced running, it's some of the best that you could even that has been displayed in superhero movies, period. Quicksilver, X-Men will always be known as kind of the best, that Quicksilver scene.
Yeah.
The fact that he has to use it so much, I think the way he it's kind of about energy and all that kind of, it looks kind of good. But otherwise, there's a ton, sometimes we're this doesn't need to be in slow motion at all. And I think that's just him and the way he kind of wants movies to look. I just don't like it all that much.
Yeah, that's his thing. He spammed it a little bit. That's all I'll say. He definitely hit the spam button on these slow-mo shots a little too often. I think, and I'm not a director. I don't have a solution for what he could have done instead of implementing slow-mo in those action sequences, but he did lay it on a little thick there.
The one thing that I think he did do a great job of, well, maybe not great, but better, is the music selection. It's a little bit thematically all over the place, but they do put kind of the original Superman theme, they put the Wonder Woman theme in there, and it does kind of flow pretty well together. It's just, I'm glad that there aren't just the Pitbull songs and all that kind of weird stuff that we've been seeing from them recently. And even you could say the same thing for Marvel. It's just kind of the same thing over and over again. Here, the music's a little more generic. The scenes actually have different tones now completely from the way they were originally displayed.
Yeah, for sure. I think music is actually easily one of the most important elements you can have in a film, and I think the way you implement music in a movie can really change how people interpret certain moments and certain scenes. And I think they made a lot of different music changes to scenes that we saw in the theatrical cut, and there's completely different emotional contexts around those scenes simply because of the type of music. And obviously, like I said, there were aspects where it's okay, it's a little heavy-handed in how allegorical or this is. You're trying to draw a greater comparison or something like that. Snyder has never been a subtle filmmaker, but obviously when it gets a little too heavy-handed, it becomes a little obvious. So there were times where it was improved over the previous version, and there were times where, like I said, Zack Snyder indulges himself a little too often sometimes.
Do you have any more specific things you'd like to talk about with the movie? Because there are some more meta things that will be discussed afterwards, but is there any other specific stuff that you wanted to talk about?
Barry Allen, much better character in this time around. I think everyone is a much better character this time around, but I enjoyed the Flash the most on this second go around.
Yeah, he was a freak in the Joss.
It was awful. It was awful.
He was not just weird, he was cringe and just, I do not want to be around this person for much too long.
It just didn't.
Weird.
The character was just kind of absurd, man, and you put, like I said, there's just a lot more emotional narrative context and emotional kind of framing in all of these characters' arcs in the movie now, and it really does help as a result of that.
Yeah, and he doesn't spend the end of the movie pushing a truck down a road. he's actually extremely
Yeah.
pivotal to the way things end, which is awesome because the Flash is one of the most important characters in Justice League.
Yeah, the scale of the film is much more, I think, much more significant. Like the events of the first film, the events of the theatrical release, they did not feel very significant or important, or have like or like they would have any long-standing implications. But definitely puts the past events in the DCEU, and then kind of the events that take place in the Snyder Cut definitely have way more kind of significance and weight.
Yeah, for sure. And there's actually a story that is meant to be told afterwards, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. But let's break this down in the most basic form and the question that everybody wants to know. Was this better than the original theatrical release of the Justice League? What do you say?
100%. Yeah, it's head and shoulders above the Joss Whedon's Snyder Cut, or Joss Whedon's Justice League.
Yeah, it's not even close in my opinion. I will go back and rewatch this Justice League. I think I've only seen the original twice, and that was just to see if it really was not that good, and it's still not. This, there can times you can appreciate it. You can sit down and watch the first couple parts, or maybe if you have a couple of parts that you enjoy, like let's say like 3 and 4 randomly, that's very nice that you can also do that as well.
Yeah, now that I've watched it, like the idea of having it split up into 6 different parts and being able to go and watch those parts individually is way more appealing now, because I'm never gonna sit down and watch all 4 hours of this movie all the way through ever again. But I would definitely go back and watch specific parts.
And I think that's fine, and I think maybe he kind of wanted it to be that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the tougher questions, and I'll ask you first because you know how I feel about this. Is this better than Batman versus Superman?
Yes, it is. I would say this is. I would say, I don't know. I really like Aquaman, but I like it for like my dumb reasons. Like, I think it's just a really funny and enjoyable movie. But this is probably the best outing the DCEU has had, I would say.
You know, better than Suicide Squad? No, I'm kidding. No, but you know I love Batman vs Superman.
This is a nice. I will say that this was a nice way for DC to pay the bills until the Batman comes out.
Yeah, I would. This is going to carry them for a while. But you know that Batman vs Superman is one of my favorite superhero movies, and that I'm sure that's a cardinal sin in most corners of the world. But that's fine. I don't enjoy movies for other people. I enjoy them for myself. Mm-hmm. I would say it's not really a matter of do I think Batman. This is unfair to you because I'm framing the question in my own form. I just asked you a yes or no question, but I think it's nice to know that like the ending of Batman versus Superman is atrocious. It's a crime against humanity. The last 15 minutes of that movie.
It's tough. It's very tough.
Because I love all the frame of reference in that movie. I think is better than the concept of it is one of the best in just superhero movie history. Like the idea of Superman being God, and can you put shackles on a human being that can end you all, and just like his playground being the earth and destroying half of it. All that stuff is great. But it's nice to know that the impact of the end of that movie is softened because of how put together the story was afterwards, and that the fact that those events were super important and led into the Justice League. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it feels when you kind of look at the theatrical version of Justice League, it kind of just glosses over the events of basically the entire first hour of what it ended up being the Snyder Cut. There was way more time spent on the fallout of Superman's death. And I think in like the theatrical version, it was literally just glossed over through like a montage of crime happening, which was like essentially the message there was that the biggest thing that happened because Superman is dead is just there's more crime, which is just such a weird thing to think about, going from how monumental his death seemed at the end of Batman vs Superman. Like, again, I don't like the end of that movie either. I don't like most of that movie, but it's supposed to be a big deal when Superman dies, and it still felt like a big deal in that moment when, you know, at the end of Batman vs Superman. And this is the first time I was able to watch Justice League and feel like it was a big deal that Superman died, you know, in that story. Because in the theatrical cut, it felt like an inconvenience. It literally just felt like an inconvenience that Superman was dead, and that was something that they had to like they had to figure out, you know?
Yeah, his death echoed through the entire universe.
Literally, quite literally.
Like I think they said the multiverse. Like they even took it a step further. Like that's how big it was, and he kind of sparked the. It really matters. Like he sparked these little whatever all sparks I'll call them. So it looks the exact same actually. Now that I think about it, so the all sparks get jump started.
The mother boxes.
Yeah. So I think that's also really really nice. That it makes more sense now. I think he kind of bailed himself out. I'm not even sure if that was his original plan. We'll never know. But at least there's some sort of concept of the most important comic book release, I think, in history. Like, it made news when Superman died in the comic books.
Yeah. All right. Obviously, I think we can talk ad nauseum about all the little aspects and nuances of this 4-hour-long gargantuan gauntlet of a movie. But I think one of the biggest things that we have yet to talk about and that we can kind of go out on is the continuation of these Batman nightmares that we've been having. Nightmare. Yeah. So I think this started, Batman has like a bad dream about Superman becoming a tyrant, right? And that kind of like sparks his motivations in Batman vs Superman. So we see a continuation of that kind of continuity, that headcanon for Batman at the end of the Snyder Cut, and the world has been ravaged. Apparently Superman is responsible, and we have a ragtag group of Batman, Mira, Deathstroke, who else do we got? Yeah, the Joker, the Flash. So they're all rolling together, and there's like this big confrontation in which Ben Affleck's Batman and the Joker get to use big boy words at each other. So what did we think of this nightmare sequence and a possible jumping off point for what people have been calling the Snyderverse? What do you think, Spence?
It's fascinating. I didn't really care about the character-to-character development, but the idea of it, of course, is interesting. But I mean, in the original version, Batman dies, so it's kind of a different universe from the one that we've seen before with Barry, right? Or I guess was that one just kind of ticked back a few? Because he like took his heart out of his body, injected his fist. Superman injected his fist inside of Bruce Wayne's body in that scene. Do you remember?
Yeah, that was really, yeah. So there's a whole bunch, like I said, that it opens up a whole new can of worms, and it seems like something along the Injustice timeline where Batman has to organize like a band of freedom fighters to fight against a tyrannical Superman. Always has been an interesting story. One that I think personally has been done a little bit to excess, especially with the Injustice video games and the fact that I feel like they've kind of milked that storyline. So I'm interested to see if Zack Snyder has a different take on it. So yeah, and there's basically no rules anymore, like we broke the glass ceiling on all of this stuff. Zack Snyder has kind of, I think, carved out specific nuances for all of these characters to the point where I don't think there would be too much confusion as to Zack Snyder's version of Batman and whatever version of Batman we're going to see Robert Pattinson play next year. You know what I mean? So maybe he does have free reign with these characters now.
And I appreciate Zack Snyder even more now, because there's a lot of directors that would not be willing to step on the biggest concepts of whatever project they're taking on. Like Marvel still plays it relatively close. Like Thanos obviously kind of broke it open for them, but he's like, I will take on Darkseid, I will take on the multiverse, and I will make it mine. Now,
I think honestly, honestly though, but I think there are directors who are more willing to tackle that kind of stuff. It's just that whether these studios will trust them. And Zack Snyder apparently has a lot of trust from Warner Brothers because he was able to legitimately redo an entire movie, and that will probably end up being way more of a commercial success than the original Justice League ever was. And so hopefully, I think I hope that this can bring is, fostering a better relationship between filmmakers and studios, in which, it allows filmmakers to be more, feel more free in executing their vision. And so that's my biggest thing when I look at like what is the long-term impact of the Snyder Cut going to be. Hopefully it's that.
I just like the idea that he has truly sat down and thought about the bigger picture always.
Yeah.
And kind of by himself. He made this movie by himself, especially this version of it. It may not have been the way, this obviously would not have been the way the movie would have originally released, but it's just cool that he knows what he wants those specific kind of big events to look like. But now we can finish things off. This will be the last question, Kevin. And really, I guess you kind of alluded to it here at the end. Will he get to do more DC stuff? Darkseid is now out there. He's the big boss. But I don't think either of us, like when Justice League was out, we were like, this is the end of the Snyderverse. But he's leaving it open for many different spin-offs. Do you think it's going to happen now?
I do, honestly. Money talks more than anything else in situations like these. And what I have seen relating to the Snyder Cut, I do think that the outlook is generally positive. I think most of the feedback I have seen from regarding the Snyder Cut has been positive. And so if this is driving numbers for HBO Max, if people are going back for this, if it is as good as it seems to be, then I definitely think we can expect more for sure. And I think it'll be in a similar capacity to where they'll just give Snyder this house money and they'll throw it on HBO Max, man. I don't see why they won't do more of this.
We just hope, and I know we agree on this, that this doesn't create a revisionist universe where all movies that people didn't like upon the release get remade.
Yeah, that's my hope. Like, obviously, like I said earlier, I have the more optimistic take that hopefully this just fosters a better relationship with studios and filmmakers. But there's obviously, very high potential that this just opens up the door for fans to strong arm studios into remaking movies, which I think would be actually really horrible.
That we can get the 5-hour episode 3 cut now, man.
That's basically next up. I think now that like all of the Snyder fans have been mobilized, like I think the fandom menace has taken a lot of notes, and they're gonna try and get that 4-hour Revenge of the Sith cut. I promise you that. I know they're gonna go hard for that.
You excited for it?
Oh no, I'm dreading it. It's gonna be awful. The discourse is gonna be bad, and I'm probably not even gonna enjoy watching it.
Yeah, Star Wars more than even DC, because this movie seems to be pretty popular. We all know
the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, just from what I've seen, like people are picking up what he's putting down. If you feel me,
it's passing the vibe check for sure.
Which is nice. It's nice to see a big theatrical release actually not flop. It's kind of the first time since the pandemic started where we've seen this, where there's actual kind of good word around a movie release.
And I'm happy for Zack Snyder, man. Like, there was, when you kind of look back at the whole series of events that led to him, exiting Justice League in the first place, I feel really happy that he's able, like, his full vision is realized, and for as a dude, I think Zack Snyder's not a bad guy or anything like that. So I think we can all at the very least be happy for him that he had something that was taken away from him, and through no fault of his own and through no fault of anyone else, and he was what became of his vision was not his. And I understand how that can feel kind of, that can leave you feeling a little empty, and so I hope he feels fulfilled that he was able to release this and that people are liking it, which is even better.
Yeah, so any final thoughts on the new Justice League? I guess we'll find out whether or not this is the true canon or not, too, at some point.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot, I think this is the tip of the iceberg, honestly. I think we're going to see more, messing around with, the universe and stuff like that. They made sure to say multiverse, so I think that if this, like I said, if it leads to just like, the Warner Brothers seeing, the profitability in letting creative people do creative things, I think that this could, we could get some really cool stuff out of this, and I am excited for that.
I
And
give
good
this
job, Zack
release-
Snyder. I officially apologize. I apologize for the slander. You caught a lot of needless slander from me. I will apologize to Zack Snyder.
I give it an 8 out of 5, 8.5 out of 10.
I'll give it a solid 7.
It was
But
good. It's
I
worth,
will,
it's worth a watch if you like the DC universe. It's a nice, refreshing superhero movie that's a little different.
Yeah, if you, especially because like I'm giving it a 7, but I would like to say that's a huge jump. I think I had the original Justice League at around a 3.
Might be worse than that. I don't know.
A 3 or a 2, but yeah, good movie.
Yeah, that's gonna do it for the new edition of Movie Monday. Kevin and I, what I really want to do, Kevin, is I want to go through the classic horrors with you.
Ooh, that would be cool.
That'll be one of our big plans coming up. But stay on the tune for every Monday. We're gonna try to release something wacky and cool. I know me and you want to do Mob Psycho next Monday, so be on the lookout for that. We love that show.
Go to anime.
I'm watching Fire Force. I'm almost like done with season 1, so that might be the week after, and we'll go from there.
Oh yeah, man, a lot of good stuff on the horizon here, guys. So stay tuned.
And thank you guys. I also say for the support for this new content, this alternate content I'm coming out with. A lot of cool comments, a lot of great interactivity. Very nice as a content creator to know that I do have an outlet to do something a little different. So you guys are the best, just the best in general for many things, but for this specifically. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Other than that, that's going to do it for tonight. And I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week.